A lot of waiting followed by bam. Here comes all the news and the activity concerning college football across the nation, the Big Ten in particular, and, of course, the Buckeyes of Ohio State. Welcome into Ohio State Buckeyes Live. We come your way each and every week, courtesy Steve Hillwagon of Bucknuts, senior Big Ten writer for 247 Sports. Steve, how you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing good, Mark. What's going on?
Oh, my goodness. There's so much going on, as we reviewed before we started to record here, with the coaches' rankings coming out, top 25 preseason just yesterday. We'll get to that in just a few seconds. Of course, we also have the players back on the field, ready for workouts. And also, of course, let's get to the Big Ten schedule that was released just a few days ago. We have speculated for weeks now concerning the original 9-game season, that being expanded to 10, how much that would be torn to shreds and restarted from the ground up versus just an additional 1 game. So as you look at the Buckeyes' new season in 2020 and this unusual Thursday night starting game against Illinois, what jumps out to you?
Oh, there's a lot of headlines here. When you talk about this handy-dandy schedule they gave us, color-coded and everything, really kind of cool. First of all, the Thursday night game at Illinois on September the 3rd, we had been led to believe Ohio State's first game was going to be on Saturday, September the 5th. And instead, they get it dropped on them that they are going to play on Thursday, September the 3rd. And my guess is this will either be on Fox Network or Fox Sports 1 is my guess. ESPN may be showing a Clemson-Georgia Tech game that night, I think. So kind of an interesting thing there that they got assigned that on about a 4-week notice to make the plans that you're going to Illinois on Wednesday afternoon that week and then going to stay over and sit there all day and play a game Thursday night and fly back in the middle of the night and go to class on Friday. So, or not go to class on Friday, as the case may be. It'll be the 4th time in 7 years Ohio State has opened away from home, going all the way back to 2014 with the game against Navy in Baltimore. They opened at Virginia Tech and Indiana there in the years since then. And curiously, this great Thursday night football experiment will take them to Minnesota to open the 2021 season a year from now on a Thursday night as well. So the Big Ten using Ohio State to prop up its TV partners and these kind of things with a special Thursday night kickoff game on the road at Champaign. And obviously the Illinois has a bowl team coming back 6-7 last year for Lovie Smith. I think they got about 20 returning starters. Brandon Rogers, the former Michigan quarterback, is back. So that'll be an interesting game. But as you go down this, obviously one of the things that made some of the biggest headlines was the movement of the Michigan game. It's been the last game on Ohio State's season since 1943. Every year, that's almost 77 years that it's been that way. And this year, it will be played on October the 24th in Columbus. The rationale for moving that game was to give it the best opportunity to assure that it would be played. Because, again, with the unknown with the coronavirus pandemic, it is entirely possible that the Big Ten or college football could get into this mid-season and shut it down because of the pandemic, and then maybe that game would not be played. So it is scheduled for October 24, and there are 2 open weeks after that in November. So in case it would get postponed, it could be replayed or rescheduled in November. They are still hopeful of playing the Big Ten championship game on December the 5th in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium. But even that is tentative. It could be played either December the 12th or December the 19th if they have to push it back because of cancellations or postponements. So a lot of flexibility in this schedule, obviously. Ohio State will play 3 teams out of their 10 that are ranked in the USA Today coaches poll. Poor Maryland has to play all 6 of the Big Ten teams that were ranked in the preseason coaches poll. Boy, Mike Loxley's got to wonder who he upset in Chicago to get such a terrible schedule. But all 3 of his crossover games are against the ranked teams, apparently, from the West. So that's interesting. But Ohio State's tough games Really, their first four, Illinois, Rutgers, Purdue, and Indiana, they ought to be 4-0 after that. Those are teams that generally they take care of business, although I brought up Purdue. Purdue is the game that was added to Ohio State's schedule. They kept the original 9 Big Ten opponents home and away the way they were scheduled, and now Purdue is added as a road game for Ohio State on September the 19th in West Lafayette. It was just 2 years ago, obviously, that Purdue pulled off a huge upset and blew the Buckeyes out. I think it was 49-20, I think was the final score. And that game kept Ohio State out of the college football playoff that year. News came out yesterday, Rondell Moore is not going to play for Purdue this year to preserve his chance to go on to the NFL. So you've got all those headlines involved with that. But OSU's schedule kind of picks up in October. October 10, Nebraska at home. Then the following week at Michigan State with Mel Tucker. You know he'd like to serve notice to the league by knocking off Ohio State, a place he used to work at with Jim Tressel, was a member of the national championship staff with the Buckeyes back in 2002. Then, as we mentioned earlier, the Michigan game, October the 24th, Fox has already said that they're going to have that. And if you figure they have World Series coverage later that day, it should be game 2 of the World Series. That'll probably be a noon start for Ohio State and Michigan. None of these game times have been set yet. Then on the road to Maryland, October the 31st. And on the road again, November the 7th at Penn State, which is considered a top 10 team in the coaches poll. They'll have an open week November the 7th. And then the final scheduled home game is November 14th against Iowa, a ranked opponent. I think they're ranked down in the 20s probably somewhere. As we said, the weeks of November 14 and November 28 on the current schedule are open for any kind of replacement, postponements, that type thing. So there you got it in a nutshell, a lot of the headlines surrounding this schedule. And to my way of thinking, as I kind of went through it, I thought the Big Ten did a bang-up job spreading things out so that there will be quality games throughout the entire schedule, really. I think like week 2 is Minnesota and Michigan. Week 3 is Penn State and Michigan, as well as Minnesota and Iowa, and then Minnesota and Wisconsin in week 4. So PJ Fleck has got 3 or 4 really tough opponents right out of the box for Minnesota. Going to be tough for them, but as I said, I really like how they've done a good job here spreading out some of the better matchups. So I know I've talked for about 6 minutes now about the schedule and everything, but there were a lot of headlines that came out of that whole discussion, and not the least of which is that they got hit squarely between the eyes on 4 weeks' notice that they're going to play at Illinois. And had they known that, they could have, by rules, started practice on Wednesday. They got the notice Wednesday morning and hurriedly decided to put together a schedule to start practice on Thursday, which was yesterday. They did a split team practice just to get everybody acclimated. Yesterday, they were putting the whole team together for today's practice. So we're already 2 days into preseason camp with this team, and things are happening pretty quickly right now, Mark.
Steve, talk 6 minutes, talk 60 minutes. That's why we've got you on here.
Oh, it's
no
great.
question about that. He's a senior Big Ten writer.
We time all summer, and now we've got actual news to talk about. So yeah,
I know that's why I opened up that way. I said waiting, and then bam, we get blindsided with all this news and activity and everything that needs to be covered and prepared for in just a few weeks for the college football season. And I've got to think, Steve, that this is the first time since World War II that we had an original schedule for teams across the nation that had to be revised and changed for a national emergency of sorts. And
September 11 was trying because they canceled that weekend's games. It was interesting. I remember where I was on that Tuesday. Coach Tressel was the coach then, and we were at his luncheon to preview their game against San Diego State that coming weekend at home. And or maybe it was San Jose State. I don't know. Well, whatever. I'd have to go back to
State, I believe.
Yeah, they needed to move the game, and both schools had an opening in October, so it was a ready-made solution to move that early season 2001 game. Yeah, it was 2001. I think it was San Diego State that they moved to later in the season, and so that was a pretty seamless change for that time. I know some schools had to wait and play their makeup games in December as well, but those were obviously difficult and trying times that we all lived through back in 2001.
Yeah, and for a lot of teams across college football in that particular season, they couldn't match up open dates with that game that they missed the weekend of September 11th, so they ended up extending the season. There were fewer conference championship games then, but a number of teams played that first week of December to make up that one game. Had a similar occurrence of that in 1998 because of hurricane conditions across the country early in the season. That affected the Buckeyes, with Miami and UCLA playing a game that would have been played in September, playing the first week of December, that knocked UCLA out of the national championship game and opened up, at least for a few hours, an opportunity for Ohio State to possibly sneak in. But Texas A&M and Kansas State took care of that in the Big 12 championship game. Got Steve Hellwagon on the line from Bucknuts 247 Sports, and as Steve has added in the live chat, bring your comments, your questions, your debate topics for Steve and myself talking Ohio State football. We do it each and every week. We talk college football here every day. So the key for you is to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for the notifications. That's the way you know that we're going live. All right. You mentioned practice that could have been started on Wednesday to prepare for that Big Ten opener on Thursday against Illinois. And just to give everyone the clean overview of what you see with the schedule, it's basically Ohio State and everybody else play 6 division opponents. They play 4 crossover games instead of the original 3. It's Nebraska, it's Purdue, Illinois, and Iowa, that final game of the season, the way the schedule looks right now. But again, there's flexibility built in based on the pandemic and possible conditions there. Who'd you get to talk to after practice yesterday, Steve?
Just the head coach. They actually made the captains available. They selected 7 captains, and they were made available via a teleconference on Tuesday. And then Coach Ryan Day conducted a Zoom call after practice on Thursday. And a lot of the time was taken up just kind of procedurally, like, how have you handled this summer of dysfunction, given everything that's happened. And he is very happy with the way his team took the proper precautions, and has also worked extremely hard to prepare for the 2020 season. He thinks that they put themselves in a good position based on how hard they've worked. So there were a lot of themes from his comments, a lot of different things that came out. He did not want to give a health update just yet on Master Teague, who is coming back from an Achilles injury. And obviously back in March, Kevin Wilson, the offensive coordinator, said he thought it would be about a 6-month injury, which would take him to about the first part of September until he was back able to be full go. So we don't have a full idea about that, but he did speak for about a minute about how hard Master Teague has worked with the training staff to get back ready to go. So you got to think he is on schedule to be back by early September or mid-September, perhaps at the latest. And very impressed they have been with his recovery, which I think is a huge part of the equation. He believes that Teague and Trey Sermon will be able to coexist in the backfield, and also likes the work of the younger guys, Crowley and Chambers, and even the freshman Mayan Williams.
Hopefully we don't lose Steve for long. We've got a lot to get to. Of course, we've reviewed the schedule. If you're just joining us, we've looked at Ohio State's revised schedule, which includes, again, Nebraska, Purdue, Illinois, and Iowa from the Big Ten Western Division, along with their 6 division opponents, highlighted by a Thursday night opener against the Illini. And that game will be in Champaign. Of course, Ohio State, Michigan will not be the final game of the season as it stands and is scheduled right now. That's an October 24th clash in Columbus. And also keep in mind that There's a date there against Iowa to conclude the season. And of course, the Buckeyes and the Hawkeyes got together in 2017, and Iowa won at 55-24 to knock Ohio State out of the college football playoff, as Purdue did the following season in 2018 in West Lafayette, 49-20. And of course, Ohio State pays a visit back to West Lafayette, the site of that game. And Rondell Moore will not be terrorizing the Buckeyes this season as he did 2 years ago in that 49-point drubbing, 49-20 over Dwayne Haskins, who threw 500 yards plus in that game and set an Ohio State record. So hopefully Steve jumps back in. Again, we've got Ohio State's schedule that we've reviewed. So if you're just jumping into the live stream right now, keep in mind that we've been on for about 16 minutes. So always, if you join us late, you just wait for the video to process and post. It does so about 15 to 20 minutes after we conclude here live. You go back and you catch what you missed. Certainly, the live chat's open for your comments, your questions, your debate topics for Steve and myself. Hopefully, Steve will make it back. And we will talk Ohio State practice. We heard from Ryan Day. Steve was just getting into those comments regarding Master Teague and Trey Sermon and the backfield for Ohio State coming up, Marcus Crowley and company. We've got to get to the coaches top 25. I gave my analysis of that yesterday. I still think I'm going to shoot a video breaking down my complete thoughts at the top 25. It was a call-in show, so it was a bit disjointed in regards to conveying my thoughts about the Amway coaches poll presented by USA Today that was released on Thursday. So we'll get to that. Would love to hear Steve's approach as a voting member of the media. This was the coaches poll, but of course the media will release its poll the final week of August. And then we've got this controversy concerning Ryan Day, Jim Harbaugh making comments during the Big Ten media call concerning the Buckeyes breaking rules of on-field instruction before it was permitted. Hopefully, again, we'll get Steve back on to comment on that because he was actually on the media call and, of course, was one of the media members to interview Ryan Day yesterday after practice. And that controversy with Harbaugh commenting on Day concerned a photo that was purportedly showing the Buckeyes assistant coach Al Washington working with Ohio State's linebackers, where NCAA rules don't permit on-field instruction until, well, this coming Friday for most teams that begin that Saturday for the Big Ten openers. For Ohio State, they were able to hit the field 2 days ago because of the opener being 2 days early for them against the Illini on the road. Steve, you doing well?
Yeah, we had some internet issues on this end. Hopefully everything is okay now.
Very nice. So you were addressing Ryan Day's comments concerning the backfield and some other issues starting practice.
Yeah, I don't know how much of that made the air before I wigged out, but he is optimistic that Master Teague sounds like he's optimistic that Teague will be back full go probably by mid-September, if not sooner, and that he and Trey Sermon will form a great tandem there at the running back position. So they've got some competition on the offensive line for jobs, a couple jobs that are open. Harry Miller going for one job at guard, and then either Nicholas Petit-Frere or Paris Johnson, probably at offensive tackle, will be going for those two open jobs. Defensively, the secondary is in a bit of a state of a flux with Shaun Wade, the only returning starter, and the competition's wide open at the two safety positions and the other cornerback position. It seems like Kerry Combs is going to alternate a lot of guys, however, so they may not have one or two guys that they hang their hat on beyond Shaun Wade, obviously, who's being picked, obviously to be a guy, to be a leader as a captain on the team. They did select 7 captains, which in this day and age, Urban Meyer was doing that typically between 5 and 7 guys a year. We think back to some of the older teams or teams earlier, they would only have 2, 3, 4 guys, but now in this day and age, they're up to 7 and on a pretty consistent basis and routine. And Coach Day said they could have actually named as many as 12 guys as team captains, probably, if they wanted to recognize all the guys who deserved it. There were, let's see here, 4 juniors that were selected as captains and 3 seniors. The 4 juniors are Justin Fields, the quarterback, 2 offensive linemen, Wyatt Davis and Josh Myers, and as well another junior was the cornerback Sean Wade, and then 3 seniors that were selected as captains. Linebacker Justin Hilliard, who I think this is his 6th year at Ohio State. You got a waiver from the NCAA to come back, as well as Tuff Borland, the linebacker, and Jonathan Cooper, who technically redshirted last year, although he got to play in 4 games and even made the agreement to play. They said you could play one more game here at the end of the year, and he picked the Michigan game where they had already clinched the division, but he wanted to play against Michigan and felt that was what he cherished the most. I mean, he could have played in the Big Ten championship game or even the college football playoff as things were headed, but he made the unique choice to make his 4th and final game to retain the red shirt as the Michigan game, which was kind of a cool thing, and they had a sack in that game as well. So Cooper, Hilliard, and Borland, the 3 seniors who are captains, to go with those 4 juniors. And I would be shocked and surprised if Fields, Davis, and Wade would be back next year in 2021. I'd put it at half and half on Myers. Maybe he'll head off to the NFL. Hard to say. But, yeah, so you've got 7 guys, look like a good leadership contingent for Ohio State at the captains this year.
We've talked a lot here in the first 21 minutes of Ohio State Talk with Steve Hellwagon, but you can catch the deep dive with Steve at Bucknuts 247 Sports, of course, one of the industry standards in covering college football. We need to get to the coach's top 25 preseason poll. A bit of a scuffle between Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh on the Big Ten coaches call. We'll get to that in just a second. But since we've invited everyone to leave their comments and questions, we'll get to one from Ballard Sports Media. Curious about the strengths and weaknesses for the Ohio State Buckeyes special teams coming off a season, Steve, in which Blake Harbaugh hit 13 of 15 field goals. And Drew Chrisman has obviously been one of the best specialists in the Big Ten at 44-plus yards per punt and pretty much saved that Michigan State game 2 years ago in East Lansing.
Yeah, I look at those 2 guys certainly as tremendous benefits for Ohio State. If they get close, obviously Harbaugh is going to knock it through for 3 points. And Chrisman is great in terms of dictating field position. I think the return game is in a bit of flux. KJ Hill was pretty useful as a punt returner, at least as a punt fielder at times. I don't know how great he was as a quote returner. And let's see here. Garrett Wilson did some of the punt returning last year. DeMario McCall, his only job on the entire team seemed to be fielding punts and kicks. So, those 2 guys are back, but it remains to be seen if somebody else is going to jump in there. Maybe one of those freshmen like a Mookie Cooper or somebody that's really got some quicks that could come in and shake things up at that position. Maybe one of the running backs gets an opportunity as well. So I think that their special teams are going to be, as always, and they're great with blocking punts. Typically 1 or 2 a year. Chris Olave had one for a touchdown or points against Indiana. They had one against Michigan a couple of years ago, Chris Olave. So I just look at it that their special teams are going to continue to be one of the forefronts of this football team.
We've got Kevin Noon jumping in here, and I'm sure Kevin is thinking, we just had a coaches poll released. The guys are back at practice. Ryan Day met with the media. He's got a scuffle going with Jim Harbaugh. We got captains named, and you guys are talking special teams. What are you guys talking about? We're taking questions, Kevin. So we'll review. Let's jump back to the start and get Kevin's thoughts first and foremost on the Big Ten schedule, and Ohio State obviously picking up the one additional Big Ten Western game against Purdue, and just what jumps out to you besides the game being played in October.
Yeah, I mean, where to start? I'm glad that we're not having to talk about COVID or anything like that at this point. I mean, I don't think we're done talking about it, but with all the news that's going on, it's certainly starting to feel a little bit more normal. We're looking at a nice little 10-game schedule that probably has gotten a little easier with the opt-outs of Micah Parsons and Rondale Moore. That week 3 trip to Purdue, West Lafayette, Ohio State's 2-4 in its last 6, 3-5 in its last 8. That's always been kind of a scary place to go. The land with no road MRI. If you listen to Jim Harbaugh, and he just likes arguing with everybody. Apparently, maybe making up for his lack of success in games that matter. Yeah, that's right. I said it. Jack Cohn never came after me, so I'm feeling pretty strong right now.
Well, you get the track record to prove it in regards to Harbaugh, so I think you're good to go. You got a lot to stand on.
The whole the game being on the 24th, I've explained to a lot of people that while the networks probably were not a deciding factor in how the schedule went down, as long as the World Series doesn't get submarined between now and then, it starts on the 23rd. So that would be game 2. And Fox would love nothing more than having that Ohio State-Michigan game as a lead-in, 3:30, not 12, because I've already looked at what everything else is. You may as well run an infomercial for Rotel or something like that, because there's not a game worth a darn that they're a rights holder to. So run that game as a direct lead-in right into the game. Carry a double-digit rating nationally throughout the entire day at that point. I find it really weird that they're going to end with Iowa. That's the biggest thing that stood out, other than just the fact that October 24th is the Michigan game. When you're going out of division, a team that they haven't played in a while, and the last time they played them was 55-24 in Iowa City. Ohio State certainly will know its Big Ten East fate by then. That 10th game probably isn't going to matter. It's a non-divisional game. They'll have played Michigan, they'll have played Penn State, they'll play everybody in the division at that point. So, it's going to be a lot of fun here talking about things as all these schedules are starting to come together at this point, and we can just start mapping out what it is that we all hope to watch week to week, and just hope that the numbers of the disease, the virus that will remain unnamed at this point, stay down, and we can return to a little normalcy around here.
So we had 7 captains named as well, and want to remind everyone to catch Kevin's work over on Buckeye Grove on Rivals, and he joins us along with everybody else each week to talk Ohio State football, and of course subscribe right here. That way you know when we're going live. All right, practice. They hit the field, as Steve mentioned. Could have hit the field earlier because of the unexpected Thursday date to open the season against Illinois, which has pushed practice back, or could have, but it was such a late decision that they did hit the field on Thursday. And then Ryan Day addressed the media before or after practice?
It sounded like after. I mean, we talked to him at 2, and I would figure they would be practicing in the morning and getting everything set up at that point, rather than trying to mess around with it a little bit later. So, he wasn't ready to single anybody out. I mean, they're out there running around in shorts. I mean, generally your fall schedule at this point is going to be a couple days in shorts, and then you'll get into shells, and then you'll finally get into full pads and whatnot. They're still having to make stuff up as they go along in terms of what schedules are going to look like and everything else, trying to keep people in small groups. How are they going to do 11-on-11 scrimmaging when they need to do that versus when they can do individual position groups. It's going to be good here. I think starting next week, we'll probably start hearing little bits and pieces, drips and drabs that'll come out of practice. But, we had an opportunity to see some photos. I don't know if y'all talked about it earlier, but, saw a picture of Cameron Babb, out there running around, a player that has just had the worst luck in the world in terms of his Ohio State career. He's healthy right now. I mean, you just can't help but, pull for that guy. If he's able to be what they expected out of high school, I mean, I don't even know what they're going to be doing with all these receivers. It's just, I mean, their second team, their third team is going to be as good as most teams' first team. So, a lot of excitement.
Hey, Kevin, just to extend your opening comments about Jim Harbaugh, Troy V here in the live chat probably is the quote of the day thus far. Speaking of Day lives rent-free in Harbaugh's head.
Exactly. I mean, old Jimmy hasn't had much success against Ohio State, has no success against, Ryan Day. And I mean, I don't understand what's going on with him going out and, allegedly, popping off on the call like that. There are policies and procedures and ways that you go about, lobbying complaints or whatever. I'm not going to try and get into the psychology behind what Jim Harbaugh is doing, but when we get on a conference call with Justin Fields and Wyatt Davis et al., and they talk about wanting to beat the brakes off of Michigan, which means it was obviously pretty fresh at that point. Yeah, there's a lot of weeks between now and then for, everybody to kind of get into routines, but why would you stoke that fire? Why, it makes absolutely no sense to poke the bear that has just, kicked your butt every year, for a long succession. I just don't understand it. I mean, it just really seems, it's. Then again, we're also talking about a guy who won't eat chicken because it's a nervous bird, and something about cow milk and this other stuff. And we all love talking about it, and it's funny on social or whatever. But God, something's got to give.
Steve, let's set the stage before you comment on this for anybody that doesn't know what happened here. So there was a Big Ten coaches call, and it's reported that and confirmed that Jim Harbaugh at one point confronted Ryan Day about a supposed photo that was taken of linebackers coach Al Washington working with the Buckeyes linebackers. NCAA rules had permitted that nobody be on the field for instruction with the players until Friday, or for Ohio State, it would have been on Wednesday because of the early game against Illinois on a Thursday night. And that's pretty much the situation, Steve.
Yeah, it's obviously something rubbed Harbaugh the wrong way. And again, I know the coaches were allowed to go on the field with their players for walkthroughs, but I do remember reading something about no position drills, that type thing. And if, he's holding a tackling dummy or whatever, I don't know what that means. It could have been he was holding it as part of the walkthrough, because they use those dummies and different things to illustrate a tight end or something in the formation or whatever sometimes as well. So I don't know what the explanation is, and I don't know if we ever will get an explanation of what happened, or if anybody's going to investigate this or not, or what the penalty would even be at this point for something like that. I don't even know, but at any rate, Harbaugh raised the question. Day said, just worry about your own team at this point. And then, according to legend, or however you want to put it, came back and explained to his team what had happened and said, guys, we're going to hang 100 points on them this year. And, not out of the realm of possibility, 62 and 56 the last couple of years. They just kept going and kept the foot to the pedal. 70 was in sight. So, I don't know. I tend to believe that they won't score 100 points against Michigan, but they've scored two of their larger point totals against Michigan the last 2 years, and seems to be no end in sight to the offensive production for Ohio State, given everything they've got coming back.
The initial aura, vibe, attitude that Ryan Day gives off is certainly one of being not emotional, very precision, very tactical, and very professional, and he is all of that. But there's a swag in there. There's an attitude. There's a confidence, and some people might say, Kevin, an arrogance there. That's not necessarily in his position a bad thing when you've got the talent that he has, and he's got confidence in his ability to prepare this team.
I mean, is it arrogance if you can, walk the walk and talk the talk? I mean, we have a small sample size, 3 games the year prior, and then the whole season last year. They were, honestly, one of the best teams in college football, and just wasn't meant to be in the Clemson game or whatnot. People are going to hate the guy on top. They're just not, it's just going to be the situation. And Ohio State has been on top of this conference for quite some time, and they certainly see Day as an Urban disciple, and Urban wasn't loved by his, fellow coaches within the conference. So, it only makes sense that it's going to carry over at this point. But the only way that anybody's going to be able to sit there and be able to do something about it is, to go out and have their team beat them. And at this point, nobody in the Big Ten has really been able to get within arm's distance of Ohio State.
All right. We got Kevin Noon on the line from Buckeye Grove on Rivals. Of course, Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts 247 Sports, talking Ohio State football. Anything that you've missed in the first 35 minutes, you wait for the video to post. You go back and catch up with the analysis there. All right. We got a coaches poll presented by Amway, courtesy USA Today as well, that pretty much is chalk. So I'm sure there's a lot of outliers. I would like to see the outlier votes of the oddball teams that would have reached the top 10. But once you throw it all together, it becomes pretty much what you would expect it to be, with Clemson edging Ohio State for the number 1 spot, the Buckeyes at 2, Bama at 3, Georgia, LSU round out the top 5. You've got Penn State coming in at 7. Steve, any thoughts about this one as it lays out?
Yeah, I think that was pretty standard what we saw. I published a consensus poll the day before, and it's very similar, where I took 15 top 25s that had come out from magazines and websites, mashed them together, and that's pretty consistent. There were a couple flips here and there, but by and large, the top 4 or 5 were all the same. And it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. If Alabama and Georgia, if, for instance, have to play twice and maybe they split those matchups, it's the only loss for both of them. Maybe both of them make the playoff. But if one of them sweeps the other one, I have a hard time thinking that that team that loses twice, Georgia is gonna make the playoff. But I say that just joking, because Georgia could honestly sweep Alabama for all I know at this point. But at any rate, I think that's going to be something to watch throughout the course of this season, is just how that league in particular unfolds, with LSU also in the top 10, Auburn kind of lurking there as well, Texas A&M, Florida is in the top 10 as well. So Georgia's not a shoe-in necessarily from the East either. So I think that's going to be a great competition down there. And I think I'm curious from the Big Ten standpoint, is there a West team that's going to threaten Wisconsin? They almost seem to have a death grip on this thing. And you look at Minnesota, which lost at home to Wisconsin last year, but did win at Wisconsin the year before when they weren't a contender. I don't know who is going to come through like Northwestern maybe did a couple of years ago and steal it if Wisconsin can't win it. So that's something to me that kind of bears watching. And we pointed out before Kevin came on that Minnesota's first 4 games are not easy. Michigan State, Michigan, Iowa, Wisconsin. I mean, Michigan State's not a ranked team, but they're going to be respectable, certainly. And then those other 3 are all ranked. So it's going to be a rough start possibly for Minnesota, and how they weather that storm is going to be interesting. And Michigan, as we say, doesn't have it necessarily easy either, with Minnesota in week 2 and Penn State in week 3. It's not a easy ramp up necessarily for Michigan this year. So I'm again, there's a lot to look at, and the rankings, at this point are just a starting point. A lot of these teams traditionally are overrated. Michigan, looking at you, in the preseason, and then maybe a few spots behind it in the postseason or after the season is over. Usually you get a playoff field in the preseason poll, and it's usually good for about 2 of the 4. Oklahoma in this instance could sneak in there from the Big 12 that's not in the top 4, and that wouldn't surprise anybody, obviously, given the fact they seem to make it almost every year and then get stomped and go home, and that's that. So there weren't many surprises, I don't think. And I guess we'll just have to see. The countdown's on. We're 4 weeks out, inside 4 weeks to the first game. It's somewhat amazing.
Yeah, was looking at the top 25 again, and I'm just kind of perplexed by the fact that I don't see 25. I think that the gap of the halves is just so small. I mean, or there's just so few teams that I look at. I'm like, all right, well, that team, yeah, I could see them getting to December. I could see that team. We kind of get to like the bottom half of the top 25. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sold on a Southern Cal being 17. I mean, maybe I just have too many images of some of Clay Helton's mediocre teams out there. I mean, I know that these votes came in before some of the opt-outs happened. Minnesota at 18th without Rashad Bateman certainly does not bode well. Utah at 20th. I don't know. I really just think that we're going to see a season, as long as it goes off and as long as, nothing crazy happens and we don't see 3 of the top 6 teams dealing with huge outbreaks or anything of those lines. I mean, what are there? 10 teams that really honestly have a hat in the ring that could honestly be that team that could be left standing at the end of the year. I could even sit there and go to number 8 and Florida, and I'm not sold on Kyle Trask. I'm not sold on that offense. I think their defense is championship caliber, but I don't think Florida's going to be able to score enough points. Notre Dame, Steve talked about, a certain team named Michigan being probably a little overrated early on. Notre Dame is always overrated in the polls. I don't think I don't know. I mean, granted, they're going to be playing an ACC schedule, which means
8 wins.
See what happens
8
when
automatic wins.
Yeah. I mean, they'll have that Clemson game and then, 9 games against Wake Forest or something. I don't even know what they got there at that point. So it's going to be fun to see what happens. But, I think we have a very strong line between the haves and the have-nots. And honestly, this is a year that I think I'm glad I'm not a top 25 voter this year, because I don't know how I would fill it out at this point, especially when you sit there and you're having to deal with everybody staying in conference. And that's going to mean that half your teams are going to win one week and half your teams are going to lose another week. And your bottom 6 or 7 spots, there could be great swings there because there's just not enough inventory out there. You're not going to be able to get fat on a lot of those group of 5 games or anything like that.
As I mentioned off the top, if we took all the individual votes and looked at them, we would see all the outliers. We would see the crazy team that we don't think belongs in the top 10, or the power team that everybody else has in the top 5 or 10 that somebody has at 23. We would see all those outliers. But if you throw it all together, then you pretty much get chalk. And the thing that stood out to me when I first looked at it is I went back to the final 2019 coaches poll after the bowl games in the postseason. And aside from Notre Dame finishing at 11 last year and starting this season at 10, it's basically all 10 teams from the previous year's top 10, when you typically, I'm pretty confident in saying you're going to have 2 to 4 teams that did not finish in the preseason in the previous year's top 10 that will not finish in this current season. If you went year to year to year to year, there are usually like 2 to 3 to 4 teams that, not that they're a huge surprise, but are not the chalk top 10 that started the season. So there's going to be some variation somewhere, whether that's a team at 14 like Texas, or Wisconsin at 13, or they started the season at 12 here, 13 to conclude last season. And Wisconsin almost seems like they're the 13th ranked team in the country all the time. That seems like their lot in life, which is not a bad place to be. No Tennessee, no Florida State, no Miami, TCU, Washington, a few notables that didn't quite make it in. The Big Ten represented by, I believe, 6 teams, if I count them up quickly here. The other thing I wanted to ask you guys is that when you do your own personal top 25s on years that you compile your own personal top 25s, there's basically 2 approaches here. The one is the one that I take, which is I don't take schedule into consideration. I just look at the teams and say, these are the 25 best teams in my estimation. This is the best team, the second best team, the third best team, on down the line. a lot of people take a schedule and then match it up against how good they think the teams are, and they try to make it's basically a prediction of where the teams will land. Steve, I don't know if you have any thoughts in regards to the way you approach this or think it should be approached.
I guess I'm kind of stuck in a world where you think about the relative strength of the team, and maybe you'll get your Phil Steele book out and see who's got how many starters back and who's got their quarterback returning, who's got stability in their program from a coaching standpoint, who has recruited the best players maybe in the cycles 2 to 3 years ago to where they've got the depth and those kind of things. But then I also sometimes will predict the Big Ten records for everybody. So then you have to pull out the schedule and pick a winner and a loser in every game. And what's funny is you'll say, oh, yeah, I'll just throw this as an example. I've got Penn State as number 12 or 10 on my poll. And then I look at how I picked their games, and it's like, 8-4. Well, that's not number 12, or that's not number 10. That's more like number 19 or 20. And so then you have to move things back and forth a little bit. If you do get the schedule out and you plot the games out, you realize really quickly that when rubber hits the road, somebody between Georgia and Alabama, somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. And then between Alabama and Auburn, somebody has to win, somebody has to lose. And, it just kind of bubbles out from there. So home and away, at least in the preseason, have a lot of a factor in that. But you look at LSU last year, what they accomplished was nothing short of remarkable. They started on the road and won at Texas. They beat like 7 or 8 ranked teams before it was all said and done. Nobody's ever done what they did last year. And I was just looking at my poll from last year. They were number 6 in the preseason and probably were in a lot of the different polls because I think there was some uncertainty coming out of the year before of just how good they were going to be. I think people here in Ohio knew how good Joe Burrow could be, but LSU was 6th in the consensus poll last year. The ones that disappointed last year, we bring them up. Michigan was number 7 in the preseason poll. Notre Dame was number 9. Texas was number 10, and Texas A&M was number 11. If you can find a murderer's row of schools that disappoint on an annual basis, I think those are probably 4 of the top 6 or 7 right there. And then the surprises last year, as we said, LSU getting into the top 4 instead of being number 6. Florida at number 8, they made a major bowl last year. Oregon won the Pac-12. They were number 12. So those were some of the prize. And Penn State was preseason number 16 and, was right there and won the Cotton Bowl, one of the major bowls. So you had a list of surprise teams that came through, maybe a little higher than they were ranked. And then that annual list of the same suspects, Michigan at 7, Notre Dame 9, Texas 10, and Texas A&M 11, that were all disappointments.
Well, Notre Dame did finish about where they started. They finished at number 11 in the coaches poll. They went 11-2 last year, 11-2, I believe. But
what bowl were they in, though? What bowl were they in? Were they in the Capital One?
They played Iowa State in whatever they call that, the Camping World Bowl, I think it is. They blew out Iowa State. That was a 7-6 team. So kind of a bad matchup, an easy matchup for Notre Dame there. That's for sure. I think that Texas A&M is the poster child for what you just talked about, and basically what I'm leading toward, and that's I think that Texas A&M probably can play with the top 15 teams in the country and have been able to, and certainly the talented Jimbo Fisher's stockpiling there, but last season's schedule included Clemson, Georgia, Alabama, LSU, and on down the line, and they lose 5 games. They go 8-5. They don't sniff the top 25, but are they one of the 15 best teams in the country? Probably. So do you weigh the schedule in there or not? And again, a lot of people, when I release a top 25, will say, well, what about this team? They got to play X, Y, and Z. And I'll say, I'm not factoring that in. It's not a prediction for me.
But if you sit there and you do a preseason poll, are you really going through, and how do you know who's the best? You're doing so much of that off of last year, and it's becoming a legacy poll at that point. So when I do a top 25, I do have to do some predicting and things along those lines in terms of what schedule looks like. And I know that maybe makes me an outlier or whatnot and how I view a poll, but I would rather have my error being in trying to extrapolate moving forward than being too reliant on looking backward to it becoming a legacy poll. Because you can't, I mean, well, you can do whatever you want. It's your ballot. But I don't want to sit there and have my preseason poll looking one way and then getting a week or two of data points and then everything being completely turned on its head just based on the fact that, you know, this team, that team, this other team happened to be playing really well in the first 2 weeks, but the legacy wasn't there to give them a higher ranking at that point. But, you know, again, that's what makes it so much fun. That's why we're able to do weekly podcasts like this. That's why Steve and I both have websites that we're able to go to message boards and have those types of conversations. Based on all the problems with the world now between COVID, murder hornets, and everything else, I'd rather be arguing about, well, your poll is stupid. Well, no, your poll is stupid compared to some of these other issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. So certainly, I think to unravel what you just said, to me, what hits home is that the poll is in and of itself the opinion of that particular person, and there should be little criticism of it until games are played. Now, if your poll doesn't make any sense, if we're 8 games into the season and Ohio State just beat Penn State and Ohio State's 8-0 and Penn State 6-2, and you've got Penn State ranked ahead of Ohio State, obviously that makes absolutely no sense. So once they start to have data points, then the poll needs to make sense, and it has to be based on the results on the field. But to start the season, I think what you do is valid, Kevin, in regards to, and I think actually that's probably the rule for most people, that they do look at the schedule. I'm just saying that I don't look at the schedule. I try to determine who I think, and of course, I put in quotations think, because I don't know who the best teams in the country are. None of us do till they actually step on the field. And my poll is crazy enough to the extent that I go strictly track record, meaning week 1 of the season, I completely abolish my preseason poll and just go based on results. So for 2 consecutive years, Maryland beat what we expected to be a good or talented, certainly talented Texas team in week 1. So I ranked Maryland really high, and people called me crazy. And I would explain, I'm not saying Maryland's going to keep this up. I'm just saying their resume right now is 1-0 and they beat Texas. So I'm going to rank them accordingly. When they prove not to be any good, they'll drop right out of the poll.
That's a way to do it. I think this year it's going to be difficult because it's only going to be apples to oranges. You know, you don't have, okay, Iowa played Iowa State, so, and then Iowa State went and played Oklahoma, and we can maybe compare the scores or something, or records or that kind of thing, you know, to determine who's a better team between Iowa and Oklahoma, which, you know, is kind of a weird way to do it anyway. But I don't know. It's going to be a challenging year, and you know, there's a lot of people, you know, if there is a season, and hopeful that there is a season, also kind of hoping for a little bit of anarchy where you have 6 or 7 viable playoff teams and they can only take the top 4. What's that going to look like? And does that lead us closer to an 18 playoff down the line, which this might be a year without those 11th and 12th data points, or I guess 12th and 13th data points, that maybe the field doesn't get separated like it does in a normal year. Because by the time the championship games are played, in most years, we have most of the imposters have been identified and ferreted out by that point. You know, Baylor and some of those ones last year that were up there at mid-season, you know, by the end of the year had fallen by the wayside. So, you know, will that happen this year? Or will there still be 6, 7, 8 viable playoff teams at the end?
Kevin, give us your best 30 to 60 seconds on this one. Let me hit you with this one, unless you got something. Go ahead.
I was just going to say one interesting thing, too, that's going to happen is what happens if you have 6 or 7 teams that really could be there at the end. And Selection Sunday is December 20th now, and the games are on the 1st. So you have a lot less time to prepare. And even if you do get your conference championship game on the 5th, on the 5th, you still have 15 games to sit there, hoping that you're going to be in. Let's say you are in. Yeah, you can sit there and spend those couple weeks working on yourself and maybe just some things that are installed that would work across the board or whatever. But if there are more than 3 other teams that are sitting out there at that point, you're not going to have a ton of time for preparations at that point with less than 2 weeks, where you were getting almost the better part of close to a month.
Let's hope it comes to that. Let's hope we have that pleasant problem to deal with.
I'm going to save my topic for next week. It's timely in terms of the season, but it's not going to be outdated by next week in regards to your thoughts about, I'm just going to save it for next week is what I'm going to do. We got Kevin Noon from Rivals, Buckeye Grove. Join him there for Ohio State football coverage. Kevin, we appreciate you stopping by as always. Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports. We hope everybody out there appreciates what we have here each and every week, typically with Tony Gerdeman as well, and talking Ohio State football. Guys, have a great weekend. We will see you soon. Hopefully we get back together next week.
Absolutely.
Take care.
We'll see everybody back here. Let's see. I've got a couple records this afternoon, but we've got some live streams coming up as well. So just keep it locked in here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.